There's a Rolex Daytona that sold at auction for $17.8 million. It belonged to Paul Newman. He bought it for $50. That's not a story about luck. That's a market that most people never saw coming, and a few people got extraordinarily rich because they understood it first. Here's what actually happened. For most of financial history, alternative assets meant hedge funds, private equity, maybe fine art if you were old money. Watches were jewelry. They were status symbols. They were things you inherited or gave away at retirements. Then the data changed everything. Around 2015, the Knight Frank Luxury Investment Index began formally tracking rare timepieces alongside wine, classic cars, and art. Watches quietly outperformed nearly all of them. Between 2012 and 2022, the category returned over 147% on average. But the more important number wasn't the return. It was the correlation. When 2020 hit and equity markets collapsed overnight, the secondary watch market barely moved. That's when serious institutional money started paying attention. Let's talk about why. Scarcity here is permanent and manufactured simultaneously. Rolex produces roughly 1 million watches per year, which sounds like volume. Until you understand that the secondary market is chasing discontinued references, limited production runs, and models that were never intended to exist in quantity. You cannot create more of a 1969 Submariner. That supply curve is frozen forever. Watches are also borderless in a way most hard assets aren't. A Patek Philippe reference 5711 commands roughly the same premium in Tokyo, Geneva, Dubai, and New York. It's globally liquid. You can authenticate, sell, and move capital across continents in days, something real estate or private credit simply cannot offer. And then there's provenance. A watch worn by Steve McQueen, a dial with a production flaw from a specific quarter of a specific year. Tropical dials, pieces whose lacquer aged in chemically unusual ways that collectors now treat like Grand Cru vintages. The more granular the story, the higher the premium. No other asset class compounds value through narrative the way watches do. But here's what most people still miss. The watch market isn't one market. It's dozens of micro markets operating simultaneously. The top tier, rare Pateks, Rolex sports references, Royal Oaks from specific eras, functions like blue chip equity, deep history, deep global demand, near certain long-term appreciation for the right references. Below that, it resembles venture capital. An independent Swiss maker releases 30 pieces. A collector with access and taste acquires 3. 5 years later, those pieces are untraceable on the open market and trading at multiples. But you had to know. You had to be early and right. COVID exposed how thin the line between collector and speculator really is. Steel sports watches developed waiting lists. Gray market premiums hit 200%. People with no history in watches were applying to authorized dealers like it was a competitive admissions process. That bubble corrected hard in 2022. Some references dropped 40% from peak, and the correction did exactly what corrections are supposed to do. It separated people who understood what they owned from people chasing momentum. The former held, the latter sold at losses and left. The market that emerged is more institutionalized. Platforms like Chrono24 and Watchbox now move hundreds of millions in annual volume. Authentication has professionalized. Watch funds, actual pooled investment vehicles built around horological assets, now exist and are drawing family office capital with serious due diligence behind them. The risks are real. Liquidity events can take months. Fakes exist at sophisticated levels. Trends rotate. Without genuine category knowledge, you're not a participant. You're inventory for someone who knows more than you. But for the person who does the work, the wrist is a portfolio. And some of the strongest risk-adjusted returns of the last decade have been sitting on someone's arm at a dinner table, completely invisible to every analyst watching a Bloomberg terminal. The money was always there. Most people just didn't know what they were looking at.